Hey friends, Kevin here, and the big question that I get from everybody is, do I need a 12-volt refrigerator in my van, SUV, truck, whatever it is I'm going to use for adventuring? Do I need that in order to be able to do this? I'm going to give you the pros and the cons, but the short answer to that is absolutely not. If you're just starting out with this, you're going to try this for a few days here and there, weekend trips, maybe a week's vacation, then no, you absolutely can get by just fine with a cooler and with ice. And that would be what I would recommend for anyone starting out and staying fairly close to home to do. Do it the easy way. Personally, I've made it on 30, 35-day trips with ice before I upgraded to 12-volt refrigerators. Now, I will tell you that that will get a little expensive. And if you are doing month-long or longer trips, then absolutely it's your first chance you should be upgrading to a 12-volt fridge. I have some linked down below that I have used. I know other people, brands that other people have that have lasted for several years. If you look on Amazon, it seems there's a new brand of these things about every 3 days, and quite honestly, I just don't trust new products with instant fake reviews. So I want to invest in a brand that I know is going to last and I'm going to get several years out of, just like the one I have in my larger van now. I think I've had it for about 4 years, and it runs 24/7, 365 thanks to a solar panel. Even when I'm not traveling in it, it's on all the time. The only time it ever gets turned off is every few months when I just clean it out and put everything back in, turn it back on, and it keeps right on ticking. And that's what I want, something I can have, I can set, I can forget about. I just want it to work. I don't want to spend my life twiddling with little things. But your pros and cons of this, your pros, one, is simply it is going to save you a lot of money. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, hey, I can just run into the nearest Walmart and I can grab me a bag of ice for $1.88. And that's fine when it happens. But you, in traveling, you will hit places there may not be a Wally World. Or maybe their ice machine is broken that day, or somebody didn't come and fill it back up, or all kinds of things that can happen. So now you're at the mercy of going to convenience stores, or you're further out towards the state park you're going to, and all of a sudden ice is $3 and $4 a bag. The other thing that will happen, you get into the hot parts of the year, you may end up having to use a couple of bags a day. And the problem with that is you have now gone to some wonderful state park, nature preserve, whatever it is, and you are 18 miles off the main road. So you're going to have to drive that 18 miles over to the main road and 4 or 5 miles into town, and then pay your ridiculous price for a bag or two of ice, and then drive back. If that's the only reason you're having to leave, you know, a lot of these things we drive do not get great gas mileage. So just having to run out and do that 40 miles, if you're only getting 10 miles a gallon, that's, you burnt 4 gallons of gas at $3 a gallon. You just spent an extra $12 to go get ice for the next day or two. So when you start adding those things together, those costs together, then the cooler refrigerator does make perfect sense, because it will, everybody says this about every product, but this is more than anything else, this is the product that will save you money over time. Once you hit that $250, as an example, that you may have paid for one of the smaller refrigerators that I recommend, at $3 a day, you're talking 80 days. If you get 80 days use out of it, everything past that is a bonus. And generally, the good brands of these things will tick on for quite a few years. Another pro for you is simply that your food is going to stay dry. Because if you've done any camping at all at any time in your life, you know when you're dealing with ice and coolers that you have leaks and food falls into stuff and ice melts into stuff and you end up having food ruined or food gets soggy or all those scenarios. I don't even have to explain them to you because you have probably been through that. The good thing about a 12-volt fridge is it eliminates that. Your food stays dry because you're not dealing with the ice. And another thing, and it is important in smaller vehicles, is you don't need a giant refrigerator to store the same amount of food because you're not having to deal with that giant bag of ice taking up all of that space and all that melted water taking up all of that space. So you can get by with a pretty small size fridge if you're traveling solo. These things are basically done, they'll do them in liters and they'll do them in quarts for the sizes, but what I basically look for, I'm trying to compute down, is how many 12-ounce cans will this thing hold? Is the capacity 30 or 40 or whatever? Because in my brain, at least, I can visualize that. I know that a case of Coca-Cola is 24 cans, and I know how much space roughly that's going to equate to. The only other thing I would mention when you're going through these is you want to make sure that you have one big enough, if you use milk, that your half-gallon or gallon of milk, it's tall enough internal space-wise that you will be able to set that jug in there, because as you know, a lot of those things you buy, they do not have screw-off lids. These milk containers will have these little snap-on lids, and if you're in a situation where you have to put this thing in at an angle to make it fit, it doesn't take much for that lid to pop off there, and then you're going to have a mess that you don't need. But in general, if you're dealing with something that can hold a couple dozen can capacity, that's going to leave you room for milk tall enough and your food to go around it. Now with the 12-volt fridge, you're going to need something to power it. Most of these 12-volt fridges, they have a safety setting. You set it so whatever source you're hooked to, your car battery, your external batteries, whatever, when they drop to a certain voltage level, the refrigerator will simply stop working. And that's so you don't, if you have it plugged into a main battery, you don't take that main battery down so far, not paying attention, that the next morning you can't start your vehicle. So in general, you are able to run one of these all night just off your vehicle's battery. 12-volt system will be fine. If you're in extreme heat, that situation may change a little bit to the point that you know, if you wake up during the night, it wouldn't hurt to run the van for 5 minutes just to make sure everything's charged back up and the 12-volt fridge is still doing what it's supposed to do. But in general, you can get by with that because it's cooler at night. During the day, that's another issue, and that's going to depend largely on the style of camping that you do. Now, in my case, I have no problem throwing one in this without a solar panel, without an external battery, because almost every day I am out adventuring and I am driving around. And while I am driving around and exploring this town or this ghost town or whatever it is, this cemetery, then just in that normal course of driving, everything is staying charged and my 12-volt refrigerator is staying nicely topped off all through the day. If, however, you're the type of person that's going out to a state park or the wilderness and you're setting up camp and you're not going to leave for 3 or 4 days, then unless you start your vehicle every couple of hours and let it run for a few minutes to have your main battery on your van to stay charged up, then you're not going to be able to pull off that 12-volt fridge in 95-degree heat unless you have the solar panel and the external battery to run it. But most people aren't in that situation. So again, for someone starting out, my advice would be to experiment. You know, when you get the 12-volt fridge, drive around with it for a few days, kind of play with it, let it sit overnight with, the van at your home base, and see if it's able to get through the night, and see if it's able to get through the day without your battery running down too far to where it can't continue to cool your food sufficiently. And you may be surprised to find out that the way that you do this on the road, you don't need the solar panel, and you don't need the expensive external batteries, and you don't need all of these things. You're going to be just fine with the 12-volt fridge plugged into your cigarette lighter, plugged into your little 12-volt port in the dashboard or in the back of your van, and you're going to be good to go. Don't overthink and don't go into overkills, especially doing your first van build. The first time you're out trying this, a lot of people, and I can count myself certainly in that category, that bought a whole lot of things and invested a whole lot of money in stuff they thought they would need that they didn't. And buying too much stuff, too big of stuff, too expensive stuff that just wasn't needed, even for long trips. But having these 12-volt fridges now, it's great. Not having to go get ice, man, it is great. No matter where I'm at, I just don't have to think about it anymore. For the long term, it certainly eliminates one more hassle off the checklist, that going to find ice, going to find ice, going to find ice. But let me know what you think. Let me know what your experiences are. Let me know if you have bought a brand of these 12-volt refrigerators for van life, especially if you have one that just didn't hold up, that tore up after a few months or whatever. Because unfortunately that does happen with some of these off brands. I've met people on the road that have gotten into this stuff, and the warranty on this stuff is pretty much useless. This is the part I want you to understand. The warranty on these 12-volt refrigerators, it's basically worthless, because you're going to have something in the meantime, which puts you back into going to buy a cooler, going and buying ice. You're going to have to pay to send this thing off to have it repaired. You're probably going to have to pay for them to send it back to you. And by the time you take this thing and find a box for it and send it off, and they have it for a month, and depending on where you're at, they can find you have it paid to send back. Your shipping cost on this thing, $50 and $75 each way, it's going to be more than the cost of, or as much as the cost almost, of just going and buying another one. So spend that few dollars extra, stick with the brands like I have recommended in the description that I know will hold up for you. Let me know what I can do or show you that will be beneficial for you. Those of you that have been out there for a while like I have, let me know your experiences. Let everybody else be able to see some of your experiences, the good and the bad, because we all learn from each other, and we'll talk soon.